All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Welcome. We're going to talk a little bit about the geothermal power project this evening. But before we do that, I wanted to just go over a couple of things with regards to the lesson and how then it'll relate to the project. Our objectives for the project essentially will be to explain, obviously, where geothermal energy comes from, describe how a geothermal system works, and then obviously explain the advantages and disadvantages, which is really the hallmark of the project. So, with that, let's take a few minutes. Let's just talk about what geothermal power is to give you just a refresher here. When we talk about geothermal, we need to think of geo being coming from the earth and thermal obviously meaning heat. So geothermal energy really consists of energy stored in the soil and underground rocks and fluids in the earth's mantle. So, generally speaking, the temperature of the rocks increases as you move downward through the Earth's interior. Okay, and this rate of increase that occurs is known as a geothermal gradient. So, really, if you go just 300 or 400 feet below ground level, the temperatures actually become quite warm. And once you really get down about 10,000 feet below the surface, the water or the temperature is actually hot enough to boil water. So sometimes water makes its way downward close to hot rocks below the Earth's surface. It's heated, and then it may later make its way back up through openings in the Earth's crust. Okay, we find those in the hot springs of the planet or in the geysers like Old Faithful at Yellowstone. So really, in parts of the world where conditions are right, the heated water can be withdrawn and used to turn turbines, just like in coal burning power plants that we talked about earlier in the year. So, how does a geothermal power plant work? Okay, back in your lesson, there was actually a link to a virtual tour. Okay, the geothermal power plant that's located up in Iceland is a great example. Iceland relies very heavily on geothermal power because it's a very active area in terms of geothermal energy. Okay, so with that, I would encourage you to look at the actual. If you go down here, look at the actual video and check it out. It's a short video, okay? And then, in addition to that, really, when we talk about where is geothermal energy used, that heated water near the Earth's surface it is used really across the world. Okay, Iceland, Chile, the United States, the Philippines, Italy, and New Zealand really are some countries that use it. In the U.S., geothermal electricity is generated in five of our states: Alaska, California, Nevada, Hawaii, and Utah. And there's actually about 8 to 10 other states now that have suitable geologic features that are really more in the western part of the country that can sustain geothermal energy plants. Okay, so what we figure, or what the United States Department of Energy figures, is about 6 million Americans can get their electricity from geothermal, which is really fantastic. Okay. In addition to that, many homes and even some businesses use geothermal heat pumps to heat and cool their homes. Okay, it's not used for electricity, but it's rather actually exploiting those differences between the surface temperature and the ground underground temperatures to essentially heat or cool a house. Okay, which is really cool. Um, so there's advantages and there's disadvantages to geothermal energy, and in your lesson there's a really nice chart that goes over it, and I'm going to scroll down here to show that to you. Here are the advantages and disadvantages. I would certainly make sure that I'm familiar with this table because you're going to want to utilize that for when you're getting into your discussion, as well as down at the bottom talking about the byproducts and how to find geothermal reservoirs. So that's really the essence of the lesson. So let's now go in and let's talk a little bit about the actual project itself. So the project is on geothermal power, and really this is just a way for you to articulate what you've essentially learned in the lesson. So The first question says that in three or fewer sentences, explain the difference between using geothermal energy to generate electricity, and geothermal energy and using a geothermal gradient to heat your home. So that goes along the lines of what I just showed you, and what we just discussed, in terms of going back into your lesson. Okay, make sure you talk about the requirements of drilling, versus using a geothermal heat pump, um, in your essay, okay, or in your paragraph. Okay, in the second sentence, it asks, in two or three sentences, explain where geothermal energy comes from and why we have to drill down so far to access superheated fluids. Okay, so in the beginning of this little video, I just talked about, um, what geothermal means, where it's stored, and how we get it. So that's essentially the essence of what I want you to capture in that paragraph. Explain to me where it comes from and where do we get it, in one or two sentences, being very concise. And then finally, describing the process of geothermal electricity by outlining, okay? And you can do this through bulleting. You can give me a numbered process. You can give me a flow chart, whatever's easiest for you in terms of what you feel comfortable that would help you understand this, okay? Um, so, you're going to want to talk about your production, well. Okay, so starting from the reservoir, going all the way up through, the energy, the rotational energy that's going to be required to turn a turbine, um, all the way up through then, setting up, a transformer to move that energy through power lines into homes and businesses. So very much like you did for the nuclear energy project, where I ask you to describe how, nuclear power is generated in a power plant, you're essentially going to be doing the same thing for this process of describing, generating geothermal electricity from a geothermal power plant. Okay, and that's it. You can submit the essay down here below. You can submit it as a Word document, or you can email it to me. Whatever mode you feel most comfortable doing with that. And if you have any questions, I'll certainly be available in the VO this week to help you, get through it, or point you in the right direction. And we'll be back here next week doing another project. So have a great week, everyone.